What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with a response video. It's been a little while since I've done one of these videos, and I saw this thread going around, and it was made courtesy of imakaiya, who I am a pretty big fan of her channel. And yeah, she's a newbie metalhead that's only been into the music for a couple of years and has already amassed a pretty solid collection. In fact, I actually gifted her an album, and it's actually an album that I have for this video. So I saw she posted this video called Metal Albums You Should Listen to Based on Your Mood, and she brought up some interesting choices, and it's separated into 6 moods: inspirational and fun, road trip music, sad music, heavy music, a good laugh, and hidden gems. So I decided to kind of go through my collection and kind of pick ones I thought would be the most appropriate for me, at least. So I decided to only do 10 because I feel like doing more than that would have been a little bit much. So yeah, so why don't we go ahead and get started. So the first one, inspirational and fun. So of course, with any music listener, you're going to get inspiration to do something, whether it be making music of your own, making videos, writing something, or building something, what have you. Just something to get you going. And then fun, just having a good time listening to it. I have 2 albums that I picked for this category, and first and foremost, I mean, people are probably sick of me jacking this album off to death, but I mean, I can't help myself. Metallica, Master of Puppets. After all, I mean, I've spoken about this album ad nauseum for years now, so you guys are probably groaning like, can you pick something else? No, deal with it. But I digress. But I mean, Master of Puppets, I mean, in my personal opinion, the greatest thrash album of all time, one of the greatest metal albums, period. After all, there's not a wasted moment on here. Like, every single song is fantastic. Right Away with Battery, and then to my favorite song of all time, the title track, Master of Puppets. And even some deep cuts like The Thing That Should Not Be, Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah, more of like a chug-along tune, but then of course the other big ones like Welcome Home Sanitarium, Orion, and the closer Damage Incorporated. I mean, this is thrash metal, in my opinion. This is what I think thrash is all about. Fast, heavy riffing, some cool melodies, big hooks, and dynamic songwriting. So, I mean, what more can be said about this album that hasn't been said already? So, yeah, for inspirational and fun to listen to, it's always Master of Puppets. And I don't even really need to listen to it all that much anymore because it's ingrained into my DNA, but when I do listen to it, I'm always down for a good time. And then the other choice is Opeth Blackwater Park. This is another one of my favorite albums of all time. After all, this is another one of those perfect albums. Like, there is nothing really to nitpick at it or be upset about. Like, literally, every song, every progression, vocal line, melody, drum beat, riff, solo, it's magical. It's absolutely magical. After all, the first one produced by Steven Wilson of Porcupine Tree, and man, you want to talk about lush and lavish songwriting. This is up there probably for the most lavish and lush songwriting of any prog album, whether it's rock, metal, what have you. Leper Affinity, a hell of an opener. Harvest, one of my favorite mellow songs. And then Drapery Falls in the title track, where it's just 2 big, heavy standouts, but also some like beautiful somberness at the end of Dirge for November. And the title track with some of the heaviest riffs Opeth ever wrote. So yeah, this is a modern metal classic. Nothing more, nothing less can be said. So now for road trip music. And I kind of was looking at it thinking, you know what would be the perfect road trip album in my mind? And for me, one band immediately came to mind, and that's Judas Priest. And I went with Defenders of the Faith for this one because I thought about going with Painkiller, but I figured Defenders is probably a little more listenable to like a casual music fan. So it's like if I were in the car with somebody who's maybe not necessarily into metal, I would say this would be a good road trip album because while it's heavy, it's still got great hooks and melody to it. And most particularly the opening track, Free Will Burning, may be the best racing song of all time. But also Rock Hard, Ride Free, The Sentinel, Love Bites, Some Heads Are Gonna Roll, one of my favorite albums from this. One of my favorite albums. Bleh, favorite songs from the album. The English motherfucker, can you speak it? But yeah, Defenders of the Faith, not only one of the best Judas Priest albums, but I would say one of the best ones for going on a road trip and listening to it on the way. So yeah, Defenders. Alright, so now to the next category, the sad ones. And I immediately had two albums in mind for this category. And first off, Swallow the Sun. I could have went with any Swallow the Sun album, but the saddest one of them all, their 2019 effort, where When a Shadow is Forced into the Light. After all, this album's pretty well documented about like why it's so sad. It's all in Yuha, I forget how, I don't know how you pronounce some of these names in Finnish, but the main guitarist and songwriter, he lost his longtime girlfriend, Elias Stanbridge of Trees of Eternity, to cancer back in 2016, and he wrote this album in expression of his grief. And man, these songs really bring a tear to your eye, especially Firelights and Clouds on Your Side. Like, those two songs in particular really get the tears flowing. And maybe even songs like Upon the Water and The Crimson Crown. But then you also do get some nods to like the older Swallow the Sun sound, like Stone Wings and the title track. But then you also get into like Here on the Black Earth, where it's borderline funeral doom, and it's sad in its own right. But and then of course Never Left, the closer. Man. But yeah, this album is just full of tear-jerking moments, especially when you read the lyrics and understand why they're written the way they are. And even in the music, like, these melodies can bring a tear to your eye. But yeah, one of my favorite Swallow the Sun albums right here, and it's one of my choices for the sad ones. And then my second choice for the sad ones, probably in my opinion, neck and neck with that Swallow the Sun album for maybe the saddest album of all time, Typo Negative, World Coming Down. After all, I've talked about this album at length, especially on the Typo Negative ranking that I did a year and a half ago. But I mean, of course, knowing the background behind this album with Peter Steele's life in turmoil at that point with cocaine and alcohol addictions, as well as him losing family members and his mother getting sick. And basically he wrote a whole concept album all about death and loss. And while it's like the lyrics are sad, some of the music on here is some of the heaviest that Typo ever written, especially the title track. But it's really songs Everyone I Love Is Dead and Everything Dies in particular. Those two songs can bring a tear to your eye, especially Everything Dies in particular. Especially those verses when Peter's just almost lamenting himself on there. But then you do get some cool, catchy moments on here, like Who Will Save the Sane and Pirate Blaze. Creepy Green Light's a big standout. I mean, top to bottom, it's musical perfection and Depression. Depression, the soundtrack, is what this album is. So yeah, Typo Negative, World Coming Down. This was the first one I had in my head for the sad ones, as well as Swallow the Sun. But yeah, Typo. So we're now halfway through the video, so now let's move on to the fourth category, I should say, the heavy ones, like some of the heaviest albums you're in the mood to listen to when you're feeling like, I want to stink-faced all the time and just listen to heavy bullshit. Well, the first one immediately came up, Asphyx, Last One on Earth. One of the heaviest guitar tones of death metal and death doom as a whole. I mean, this album, top to bottom, in my opinion, the best death doom album ever. Opening with MS Bismarck, The Crusher, the title track itself, it's ungodly heavy. Streams of Ancient Wisdom, Food for the Ignorant, that big doomy breakdown, that just screams heavy. And then the song Asphyx Forgotten War, that song, this whole album perfectly epitomizes heaviness within Death Doom, and one of the heaviest albums, period, simply because that guitar tone that Eric Daniels was going for on here was just... I'd like to know what gear he was using to get that tone, because... it's nasty. Nasty shit. But yeah, Asphyx, Last One on Earth. And then the other one, maybe one of the heaviest thrash albums of all time, and one of my favorite thrash albums of all time, Sepultura, Arise. After all, I love this album to death. If I had to listen to one Sepultura album for the rest of my life, this is the one I go to the most. The title track, my favorite Sepultura song of all time, and one of the fastest, heaviest thrash songs ever. But of course, top to bottom, it's brilliant. Dead Embryonic Cells, Desperate Cries, Infected Voice, Murder, Altered State, just grooves and brutality all over the map, but with some cool melodies to kind of accentuate the heavy parts. But yeah, just the guitar tone on this album is just monstrous for as aggressive as this album really does get. And of course, Max's vocals, just disgusting. So yeah, Sepultura, Arise. So now on to the penultimate category, which is a good laugh. Think of an album that makes you laugh all the time because of the silliness behind it, but also just how fun it is. One band immediately came into my head, and that's Psychostick. And I went with their third album, Space Vampires vs. Zombie Dinosaurs in 3D. Because this was the first Psychostick album I got into back in high school, because of some buddies who were into it before me. And I mean, just the ridiculousness of the lyrics and some of these song titles, like The Root of All Evil is about going to the dentist and hating it. God knows I hate going to the dentist, and I need to get to one pretty soon. But yeah, that song may be my favorite Psychostick song because it was so funny. I played it for my mom once. She about pissed herself laughing. She was like rolling. But of course, Numbers, I Can Only Count to 4, a goofy parody of Bodies by Drowning Pool. My Clingy Girlfriend's pretty hilarious. Because Boobs, an anthem all about loving ladies' titties. After all, who doesn't love ladies' titties? Men and a lot of women probably love other women's titties. If you don't like titties, then get the hell out of my channel. I was kidding, but still, something's wrong with you if you don't love big lady titties, or ladies' titties in general. Sad Face, that's another goofy one. Hate Times 8, just that chorus is goofy enough on its own, but then again, everything about this band is goofy. But yeah, Psychostick, can't go wrong. You can really pick any Psychostick album for a good laugh, and you're going to have a good time. But I'm going with this one because it's my favorite. And now on to the final category, Hidden Gems. And for both of these albums, I decided to go with two underrated thrash albums that I feel more people need to check out, and ironically, both came out in 1990. First, Mesro, Then Came the Killing. This is the debut album from this Swedish thrash band this is their first album, and then their second album comes out 33 years later, last year with Summon Thy Demons. And that album was masterful in its own right, but this was where it all started. And yeah, definitely tone-wise, they were definitely going for a lot of Testament and Metallica on this album, especially on songs like the title track, Frozen Soul, Ancient Terror, Where Death Begins. And even the second disc, which is the Then Came the Demos, even those tracks, the demo versions, are pretty nasty as well. But yeah, this album, I feel, actually the whole band, Mesro, needs to be looked at more, because both albums they've released so far are fantastic examples of thrash metal from Europe that's heavily inspired by the Bay Area scene, mostly Metallica, Testament, and Exodus. But yeah, this is a hell of a start for this band. And then the final one for the overall video, I went with Zentrix, For Whose Advantage. After all, I've become a huge fan of Zentrix after going back through their old stuff, and then the last album that came out a couple of years ago, 7 Words. And this is, in my opinion, the best Zentrix album and one of the most underrated thrash, or dare I say, underrated metal albums, period. And this is definitely Metallica-esque. Like, this almost feels like And Justice for All Part 2, almost, because of just a little more progginess and a little more technical riff work, but some catchy riffs that feel like they could have been on And Justice for All. But songs like Questions, the title track, False Ideals, The Bitter End, masterpieces, especially False Ideals, which is maybe my favorite Zentrix song of all time. After all, these British legends need more people to listen to, because, like I said, if you are a fan of like mid to late 80s Metallica, like Master of Puppets and Justice for All, throw in a little bit of proggy technical wizardry on top, you will dig Zentrix. This is some fantastic stuff. And that, ladies and gentlemen, does it for this response. So, yeah, this was definitely a fun one to go through because, yeah, definitely whenever you're in certain moods when listening to music in general, you definitely want to go towards stuff that would perfectly fit the mood that you're in, whether you're pissed off, you're happy, sad, or just anxious, what have you. But thank you, imakaiya, for creating this thread. This was a really fun one, and I'm sure a lot of you guys who are watching this already know who imakaiya is, but for those 5 that don't, I'll have a link to her YouTube channel in the description box. I've actually popped in on her live streams, and her Discord server is pretty fun with some other metalheads listening to some underground obscure shit. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.